Alright, hello, you're welcome, good night, how are you keeping? You're very welcome to another episode of the From the Depths podcast. As always, my name's Emmett, and you're very, very welcome to the show. So, I have tried about 3 or 4 times to record this, and this is the first time that I have sat down in ages to record one of these by myself. The last few of them have been interview based, and it's been so handy. I just record the podcast with whoever I'm interviewing, then the day before it goes up, record the intro, record the outro, edit it together. It's grand. It's the first time in ages I've had to sit down and do one of these in full by myself. And I was kind of bricking it, so it's why I decided to do the topic that we're doing this week. This is the first of a retrospective series on the podcast. We're going to take a look back at the career of a particular band. Now, this week's one, the first one, is going to be about punk icons, I was about to say the legends, the Misfits, one of my all-time favourite bands, and if you were not a fan of them, I definitely think you're going to be checking them out after this episode of the podcast. Fantastic fucking band. Got into them when I was about 15 years of age. I got into them through wrestling of all things. I remember being about 16 years of age, and CM Punk went to the ring in a Misfits top, and I remember trying to find out all that evening after watching it online what the fuck that was, because I knew the image from somewhere. I knew that much. And yeah, I found out it was from a band, got into a band. And what's cool about the Misfits anyway for me is they were kind of like the first band that I found by myself. Like, you know, bands like the Beatles, bands like, you know, Queen and stuff like that, you don't really find them yourself. You get turned on to those bands by other people. But the Misfits were kind of the first band that I could that I found that I could go from the get-go, these are mine. Do you know what I mean? I found this by myself. And what a great band to have that be your first band in that sense. Like, they are definitely the bridge for me into bands like Sabbath and Metallica and stuff like that. Yeah, the Misfits were the first band I really got big into. I had a phase when I was about 15 where all I listened to for a good 6 months was punk. I was huge into like Rancid, the Ramones, Operation Ivy, Minor Threat, Black Flag, like Choking Victim. I was huge into all that stuff, but the reason for it was the Misfits. I was trying to find stuff on par with the Misfits, and you know something, I don't think I ever really did. Outside the Ramones are probably my favourite band of all time. Or is that Thin Lizzy? That's a podcast and stuff, and I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, the Misfits, super fucking important band for me. Yeah, like I said, bridge for me into everything, and I think a major reason for it, a major reason that I actually ended up checking them out, was I mentioned that about like the Fiend Skull or the Crimson Skull, whatever you want to call it. But I'm holding a copy of Evil Live in my hand right now at the moment, and their imagery through not only in the original run when they were fronted by Glenn Danzig, but even the run with Michael Graves, all of the imagery was always very vivid. The colour schemes were always very vivid and striking and stuff like that. And yeah, like if you go and do a quick Google search on like Misfits album covers after this, you'd see it for yourself, especially the singles and the EPs throughout the original run too. And like you can't really find many band icons that are more iconic than the Fiend Skull. Like, that's in itself, it's almost bigger than the band. It's on everything, you know what I mean? I'd imagine the band has definitely sold more t-shirts than albums throughout their career, and you know something, I'm not surprised, because that Fiend Skull is just such an iconic image. I was actually due to be getting a Misfits tattoo late last year. I was supposed to be getting, I decided Christmas time I was going to get it, and unfortunately for me, then all of the fucking cases went up again, and yeah, haven't been even able to get a haircut since around December, which is really annoying. Most of you listening to this probably have long hair, so you won't care anyway. But I'm very vain. Anyway, let's do the old housekeeping, get that out of the way, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the Misfits. So if you are new to the show, if you've been with us from the start, or if you've hopped on somewhere in between, your listenership is always very much appreciated, and I'm thankful, very thankful for you all checking out the podcast every week. It is serious crack putting these together, and it's really nice when I get the odd message every now and again saying whether people enjoy the podcast, they hate the podcast, or whatever. Whether you liked it or not, it doesn't matter. The fact that people are listening and engaging with it is fucking cool. And yeah, really happy to be putting these together. If you enjoy the show and you want to support the show in any way, recommending it to a friend and all that kind of stuff, and sharing it and everything like that is the most helpful way you can do that. But outside of that, Following the From the Depths social media pages really helps as well. I don't know if I mentioned this before on the show, but when I approach particular artists and stuff like that about interviews, a lot of times their follower count will genuinely have an impact on that. So if you've less than 1,000, some like management figures and some labels won't even consider it. A lot of people still do. A lot of them have been really sound with that. I've already got a serious amount of savage interviews lined up for particularly over the summer, which I can't wait to get recording out there. Which really does help. So if you can like and follow the social media pages, that'd be absolutely fantastic. You can find us on Instagram at From the Depths Metal, and you can find us on Facebook at From the Depths Metal Radio as well. So outside of the podcast comes out every Friday. It's up on YouTube and Spotify. As well as that, I do a weekly radio show for a Limerick radio station by the name of Wired 99.9 FM, and that is simply titled From the Depths. It's the namesake of the podcast. And yeah, the format of that show every week going forward is basically I'm going to go onto the Metal Archives website, and I am going to live react to bands I find through the random band generator function on that site. So I gave it a go yesterday, and just my luck, like I did about 5-6 bands. All 5 or 6 bands that I went on to, none of them had anything up on YouTube, which makes it impossible to react to them, but sure, luck 'tis great. But that's what the show is going to be anyway on Wired FM going forward. I should probably come up with a different name for that, considering the podcast is called From the Depths and the radio show is called From the Depths. It must be very confusing for a few out there. Anyways, what else do I have to plug? Yes, I mention this every week on the show since the lads were on, but the lads in Zephyr are currently running. Second, I move a little bit closer. Cover your ears a second now. There. So yeah, I mentioned it there every week since the lads were on. Zephyr have been doing a fundraiser in Edinburgh at a house to mark the anniversary of their friend Danny, who sadly died by suicide just shy of a year ago, and that fundraiser will be open until some point in May. I have the link to the fundraiser on the link tree, which is in the bio of the From the Depths Instagram page. So if you go onto the Instagram page, click on the link in bio, you will find all the links to the Spotify page, the YouTube account, what else is on there, the Mixcloud, and you'll also find the link to the lads fundraiser too. The lads have blown the roof off of their target, and yeah, they're doing absolutely fantastic with that. And yeah, if you're in a position where you can donate any money at all, please consider doing so. It's a fantastic cause. And yeah, that is, I think, everything I have to cover on the housekeeping front for this week. So we're talking about the Misfits. The Misfits are a punk band, or at least were a punk band, formed in 1977 by Mr. Glenn Danzig. Initially, he formed the band with a fella by the name of Manny Martinez, I believe. He was the band's first drummer, and Martinez would acquire the band's bass player, originally going by his actual name of Jerry Kaifa, I believe his second name is. Who was only playing the bass for 2 months when he joined the Misfits. And yeah, that was the first active lineup of the Misfits. So the Misfits would go and record their first single, which was simply called Cough Cool. It was a very different sound to what the band would go on to do over the next several years. Danzig on this release would play keyboards and provide vocals. Jerry would play bass and Martinez would play drums. And it's kind of a weird gothic type of thing. The sound is very unique, very different to what the band would do in over the next several years. Like I said, I really recommend checking that out. Even if you're listening and you hate the Misfits, listen to that, because it's such a different sound, and it kind of kills me when I listen back to Static Age that there wasn't more songs where Danzig was just playing the keys and they had the bass and drums going and the guitar were just totally left out. I think it was a very unique sound, and like what kills me then is they re-recorded, like I'd imagine during the Static Age recordings that some songs were done like that. They did have a guitar player by the time they got into the studio for that, but yeah, I'm rambling small, but very cool, unique sound. You can find it on YouTube. Very fucking expensive to find that though. Very expensive to find a physical copy of that. I saw recently on a bidding thing, I am pretty certain that a copy of that sold for $500,000. There was only about 500 singles of that printed, and yeah, it is a part of American music history too. Like the Misfits are a fucking huge band in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, the band released the Cough Cool single in August of 1977. On the back of that sleeve, Jerry's second name was spelt wrong, so he requested any more that his name be put down as Jerry and Jerry only. And ironically, that he would start going by the nickname Jerry Only from then forward. And yeah, they got guitarist Frank Licata on board in August of 1977. Shortly after that, Mercury Records approached Danzig about wanting to buy the name Blank Records, as they wanted to name a subdivision of their label that. They didn't have any money to offer Danzig, but what they did instead was they were like, here, we don't have any money to pay you, but what we can offer is 30 hours of studio time if you want to take that instead. Danzig jumped at the opportunity, and the band would go into the studio in January of 1978 in a New York studio to record 17 songs. 14 of these were mixed for the proposed Static Age album. Unfortunately for the band, they were not able to find a label at the time, so those recordings were released sporadically throughout the band's initial run throughout 1977 and 1983. Some were released as part of singles, some were released as part of EPs, and yeah, that album would not come out for another 20 years. It was released in 1996, I do believe. But we're touching it now. Do you know what I mean? There's no point in me going on, like, when in the 90s when the Misfits came back together and stuff with a different lineup, there's no point in me talking about this album during that period when it actually came out. We should probably talk about it here when it's recorded. So it was recorded in between January and February 1978 in New York City. This is my favourite Misfits album by a mile. It's a fantastic album. I'm going to tell you why. The track list screams classic after classic after classic, like, do you know what I mean? Opens up with a very short and sweet Static Age title track. You're going to TV Casualties, Some Kind of Hate. Then we start jumping straight in to the Misfits classic. Track number 4, the iconic Last Caress, goes into Return the Fly, Hybrid Moments, We Are 138, Teenagers from Mars, Come Back, Angel Fuck, Hollywood Babylon, Attitude, Bullet, Theme for a Jackal, the re-recorded version of She, Spinal Remains, In the Doorway, and then 2 bonus tracks as well. To the best of my knowledge, they're messing around, kind of jamming tracks. I don't think it's an actual like musical track, but anyway, those tracks alone, like Last Caress, Hybrid Moments, Teenagers from Mars, Attitude, and Bullet, these are fucking classic Misfits songs. All the tracks in this album are written and composed by Mr. Glenn Danzig as well. Clocks in very short, sweet, over 35 minutes. If you take out that like unlisted track towards the end of the album, you're probably looking at more at like 25 minutes. Very short and sweet. Listen, like I said, I can't recommend listening to it enough. Very different band compared to what they would do in the following LP and stuff like that. But it's great. You can tell straight away that it's like a bunch of kids who are obsessed with like sci-fi and B-movie horror movies, and they're just learning their instruments. That's what it sounds like, and it's fucking killer, and I can't recommend checking it out enough. If there was any album throughout the band's initial run that I would recommend checking out, it would be that one. So that was released in 1996. Like I said, it took them ages, or no, 1997 it was released, sorry. It took them ages upon ages to find someone to release it, and I think what ended up happening there was once Metallica covered a few Misfits songs on the Garage Days compilation in, was that 95, 96 maybe? I'll probably have that wrong. There was a huge resurgence in popularity for the Misfits, as naturally it would be, because Metallica were probably the biggest rock band in the world at the time. Yeah, the reunion happened around then too. Totally makes sense as to why. But they had no problem getting that out at that stage. Then there was definitely like more, like, people were really, really obsessed with the Misfits, and the cult following it kind of started in the wake of the breakup and stuff like that. But yeah, no problem getting that out. I'm after going a little bit too far now. Yeah, I'm already after skipping the 80s. Okay, let's backtrack a bit. So yeah, Static Age was recorded in February of that year, and then what they would do is, because they couldn't get a label to release it, they would release Bullet single via their own label, Plan 9 Records, and they named the label after the B-movie horror Plan 9 from Outer Space. So, like I said, all the other songs that were to feature on Static Age would actually feature as part of singles and EPs and stuff throughout the band's initial run. A lot of them then were re-released as part of compilations in the wake of the band's breakup, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. So, the Misfits began to shift thematically at this point. They were kind of like, I don't know, they kind of looked a little bit like kind of gothic rockabilly things, if that makes any sense at that stage in their career. They were all very, very young at this time. So what happened was, post Static Age, they started to adopt way more of a horror imagery around them than like what they're known for. And it's very, very apparent. Like Jerry only started sporting the devil lock at this stage, which is just basically you take big strand of your hair, feed a load of hair gel through it, stick it down over your face. And that style would be adapted by both Danzig and Only's Jerry's younger brother Doyle as well, who would join the band at a later stage. They also started wearing more black. The Fiend's skull would have started appearing at this time. It appeared as part of the Horror Business EP. So once that EP came out, that was the first time the band used the Fiend's skull, which they took from the Crimson Skull serials, the film serials from the 1940s. They were all on YouTube to check out. I've never actually watched those, but yeah. So what did they do next? So the band released the Bullet EP and stuff like that, or the Horror Business EP, sorry, which had the Fiend Skull and stuff like that in front of it. This would become a huge thing for the band. It's literally on anything to do with the Misfits since. How it's not actually part of like their font, like of their like the word the Misfits font or something, that it's not like the I, it's not the dot over the I or something, amazes me, because it is literally on everything. And around this time as well, Danzig would launch the Fiend Skull fan club, and what the Fiend Skull fan club was basically it was the Misfits way of interacting with their fans. So he operated this under a do-it-yourself attitude, where in his mother's basement in Lodi, New Jersey, he would print the t-shirts, he would assemble the records once they came from the pressing plants, he would mail off merchandise catalogues to fans, he'd book shows, and he'd answer fan mail as well. And all you had to do was you literally just had to write to the address, and anytime they got like stickers or anything made up, they'd send them out for free. Really, really great initiative. Weird one now following that, right? So they had the imagery and everything like that going on. They were building a huge, well, not a massive following, but within punk circles they were getting pretty big, and particularly around the New York area. And they opened for the Damned, the UK, British punk legends, the Damned, in June of 1978 or 79. Let me double check that one to be sure. 1979. They opened for him in New York, and after the gig, in conversation with Dave Haney, and Jerry Only mentioned the prospect of opening for them on a UK tour that was coming up. And Vaney, he humoured it and everything like that. Only definitely misinterpreted what he said, because the lads packed up and flew out to the UK when that tour was starting. And when they arrived, the Damned were kind of looking at him like, what the fuck? Vanian had not taken Only's proposal seriously, but in fairness to Vanian, he did scramble at the last minute and do his best to actually get the lads on the tour, which he did. But the lads weren't very happy with the setup, and they left the tour after only 2 shows, which is a shame. That would be a cool one to see, as the Damned and the Misfits open. Cool little note though that I must have thinking of there is when the original lineup of the Misfits got together a few years ago and did a few reunion shows in the States, the Damned did open up for a few of those shows too, so it's actually cool how that flipped around. So yeah, what ended up happening was, because their flights back to the US weren't until the end of December, and this was in November they left the tour, so they were kind of stuck in the UK for about 2 months. During that time, Jerry Only would befriend and hang out with Sid Vicious's mother. And a weird one they did as well was, when they were hanging out and stuff like that, she told him that Sid was not allowed to be buried beside Nancy, mainly because her family were convinced that he stabbed her. I never really looked into that, so I don't know if it's true or not. So what they did was, Sid had been cremated, and they took Sid's ashes and they snuck into the graveyard at night, and they spread the ashes over Nancy's grave. So it was kind of nice little symbolism there, that the pair of them being able to be together and stuff like that. I always thought that was so strange though, that Jerry Only just randomly became friends with Sid Vicious's mother. I never really looked into that either, but it's came up a few times in videos and stuff like that I've watched, so I know it's true and everything like that. But weird kind of relationship, weird friendship to randomly come together. Weird one happened on this little period where they were stuck in the UK too. Was Danzig got involved in a brawl with a few skinheads and ended up staying in a prison cell overnight, or in a jail cell overnight, and this would be the inspiration for the song London Dungeon. They eventually got to go back and everything like that. Oh, hang on, I'm looking at my notes here. They got into a fight with Peter Steele, or what's his name? What's his name? Oh no, I can't find it. But then they got into a fight with skinheads waiting to see the jam of all bands, which I think is hilarious. Yeah, it was Bobby Steele was arrested with them. Oh, okay, cool. So they would release the Beware EP in January of 1980, and after this, the band would take a 4 month break. During this period, they acquired a new drummer by the name Arthur McGuckin, and as well as that, Jerry Only's younger brother would join the band as band's guitarist. He is, of course, the legendary, iconic Doyle. And yeah, he had actually began playing guitar through Jerry Only and Glenn Danzig. They were showing him how to play guitar, and he was literally learning specifically how to play Misfit songs. To the best of my knowledge, I've seen interviews with him. He very much describes himself as meat and potatoes guitar player, and yeah, he was just learning Misfit songs. So it's weird. People are always labeling him a Misfits guitar player, and that was really what he was trained to. He was trained on the job to do that role and do what he did. So yeah, he convinced the lads that he would fit the band better than Steele. So he made his debut with the lads at their annual Halloween performance at the Irving Plaza in New York City. So after that, they had a few more performances. They took a sabbatical for about 6 months, and during this period, they would release the Three Hits from Hell in 1981, and as well as that, they would start working towards their first official full-length release, which is Walk Among Us. They initially wanted to release it through Plan 9 Records, but instead they accepted an offer from Slash Records, deciding to rework the album before its release. And in October 1981, they released 2 more tracks from the 1980 sessions as the Halloween single. Yeah, great single actually. I don't know, is it the B-side of that, Halloween 2, where it's like, I don't know, is it in Latin or whatever, really, really gothic and dark sounding, and it sounds way, way more similar and akin to what Danzig would do in Samhain and his solo stuff with Danzig later on. Oh yeah, so during this time, Black Flag singer Henry Rollins and Danzig would develop a friendship and stuff like that, and they recorded the show that would be used for the Evil Live album during this time. And on the final track, We Are 138, Henry appears as guest vocalist in that. I have owned that record for a few years now, and I did not know that until recently. I did not over-examine the sleeve of that like I normally do with records. Anyway. Okay, so Walk Among Us was released in 1982. Let's talk a little bit about that. It is most people's favourite Misfits album. It is an iconic punk album. I'm looking at it now. Just the image on the front of it of the 4 lads in front of like this weird bat spider creature with alien flying saucers and stuff like that. On the back of it, you've got like portrait shots of 3 of the lads. Yeah, such a great record. Opens up with 20 Eyes, into I Turn Into a Martian, All Hell Breaks Loose, Vampira, Nike A Go Go, Hate Breeders, Mommy Can I Go Out and Kill Tonight. It's a live version of that. Side 2 features Night of the Living Dead, Skulls, Violent World, Devil's Whorehouse, Astro Zombies, and Brain Eaters. Fucking brilliant record. Really, really like this. It just misses the mark for me compared to Static Edge because it's just that little bit shorter. But yeah, do you know, I recommended Static Edge there as the album I would recommend to people wanting to get into the Misfits. But you know something, to be honest with you, with how many people prefer this album over Static Edge, and especially over Earth AD and Wolf's Blood, I would definitely recommend this to be the album that you check out if you're looking to get into the Misfits. This is a fantastic album. Very short and sweet. I think it's about 26 minutes around that. But yeah, good representation about how the band sounds. It was released on Slash Records in 1982, and the lineup at this time is Glenn Danzig, Jerry Only, Doyle, and Arthur Googie on the drums. Yeah, it's a cool one. I wish I could play a track from that now on the show to give you a feel for it. But sure, look, copyright is a thing, and the show would be taken down. So after that, 1982, they embarked on a national tour with the Necros. During the tour, they stopped at a studio to record the instrumental tracks for their next EP. They were arrested in New Orleans on charges of grave robbing while attempting to locate the grave of voodoo practitioner Mary Laveau, but bailed themselves out of jail and skipped their court date to drive to their next performance in Florida. Funny one about that was I think Robo might have been playing with them at that stage again, and it was Jerry and Doyle's brother was like, I don't want to say the manager, but like kind of like the road manager at the time, and he came with the money to bail him out, and he looked Robo dead in the eye, and he was just like, I don't have enough, and he was apparently looking at him like, what? But I know he did have enough, and he bailed out all the lads. So on October 1983, the lads would play their annual Halloween performance at the Greystone Hall in Detroit with the Necros. Brian Damage, real name Brian Keats, formerly of Genocide and Verbal Abuse, was the band's new drummer at the time. Unfortunately, he would get absolutely fucking shit-faced before the band's performance and was unable to perform on the night. To the best of my knowledge, there is no video footage of that. There is no bootlegs of it, but weirdly enough, there is still shots out there of him being taken from the drum kit. Doyle apparently got a hold of him and just fucked him off the stage. He was just like, no, fuck you. If you're not going to take it seriously, fuck off. So Todd Swallow of the Necros, he filled in for the remainder of the performance. Tensions had really, really came to a head at that point, and Danzig announced to the audience on that very night that they would be splitting up, and that would be their final performance. So the Misfits' final performance, Halloween night 1983, after 6 years of serious output and stuff like that. I didn't really touch on the singles and EPs during this period. There's quite a lot of them, and as well as that, everything really that is released as a single and stuff like that, it's released as part of compilations and stuff like that later on. However, when the band broke up, Danzig went on to form Samhain. This is way more of a metal influence and stuff like that, but they did release Earth AD Wolf's Blood, which is I don't want to say that it's my least favourite Misfits album, because it's not. It's definitely my least favourite release from the original era of the band. It's way too short. I know Danzig is of the same opinion as me. Songs are played way too quick. It's way more of a hardcore influence than a traditional punk influence and stuff like that. And you know, if you take that album, right, and you slow down the speed of it, the only thing that's really going to sound off is Danzig's vocals in it, but it makes for a way better album. They will never ever go and re-record that or anything like that, but I'd love to see it in some way. If there's anyone out there who has a Misfits cover band, would you re-record that and slow down the tracks? 1 second now, and I get the old thing up. I haven't listened to that album in fucking forever. 1 second now. Where is it? I had all these notes saved. Jeez, this is the most professional podcast ever. But yeah, Green Hell is on that. Die Die My Darling is on that one as well. There's loads of great tracks in it. But like I said, it's a pity they're played way too quick. So after that album came out, the album was released after the band broke up. It didn't sell particularly well. But the band would have a resurgence in popularity after Metallica covered them on the 598 EP Garage Days Revisited in 1987. Guns N' Roses would also cover Attitude on their cover albums, and their cover album The Spaghetti Incident in 1993. And as well as that, like I mentioned, Danzig would go on to form Samhain, and after that he would go on to have a very successful solo career under simply Danzig. The first two Danzig albums, absolute fucking classics, can't recommend those enough as well. But as for Jerry Only and Doyle, they moved to New Jersey to work at their father's machine factory part-time. And they formed a very short-lived Christian heavy metal band called Christ the Conqueror. I have never checked this out. Apparently it was active between 1987 and 1995. Jesus, they have an album. They did have an album. They have an unreleased album. Second now. Although it's not really on the... Oh. Okay, here's a gas one. So Christ the Conqueror was later revamped into the newly reformed Misfits, and at the first recording session, the band re-recorded Dr. Five's Rises Again, although it was not released until 2001 on the Rarities album Custom Crypt. Oh, That's savage. And apparently you can find that album online. That is actually so cool. I must check that out after this. I wasn't going to cover that anyway, so sorry. So yeah, the Misfits are done at that stage. The Misfits are done. You know, like I said, they had a short and sweet following within the punk scene in the United States, a little bit of a following abroad, but nothing major. More akin to a cult following than anything else. After their resurgence in popularity after Guns N' Roses and Metallica covered them, Jerry and Doyle were making moves to try and reform the band in some capacity throughout the 90s. And what ended up happening there, I know there was a court battle at some point between the two lads and Danzig for the name The Misfits. Only would end up winning that. And once he got that, he decided to revamp the Misfits in some form. They did make contact with Danzig to try and get him on board, try and get the original lineup back on board together, and he didn't even answer their calls. It was none and done. There's also a story as well that they knew he was in a hotel. They went to the hotel and Danzig had the pair of them removed as well. So what ended up happening was they would go audition for singers, and they would acquire a young 19-year-old man by the name of Michael Graves, who would be fronting the Misfits throughout the remainder of the 90s. As well as that, they would get Dr. Chud as their drummer, and arguably they would have their most commercially successful period at this point. The band would get together in what year was it that they got back together? Oh, hang on. I'm going to have to find another one as well. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be looking at this now while I'm fucking recording the podcast. Dave Vanian from The Damned, who they had toured with earlier, was actually approached about fronting the Misfits. And that is one I never fucking heard before, and that would have been fucking hilarious. That would have been, I don't know, it would have been funny. In theory, it sounds like it would be good, but I can't imagine that blending really, really well. But, so the Misfits would be reformed in 1997. Before that, all of the old recordings that hadn't been released were released as part of the Misfits Coffin box set, which was an actual wooden box set which held Collection Part 1 and 2, as well as, for the first time ever, the Static Age recording sessions in full, and that was later released independently on its own as well the following year. So the band would get back together, they would form with their new lineup, and they would release American Psycho in 1997. They would release music videos for this, for the title track American Psycho, as well as for Dig Up Her Bones. I had a look at that video today on YouTube for the first time in about 8 or 9 years. That video has 54 million views, which blows my fucking mind. Like, most Misfits videos at the most have 1 or 2. 54 million views for that is absolute insanity. The tracks on this one, it's very divisive, this era, the band, compared to the Danzig era. You kind of have Danzig loyalists and you have Grave loyalists. I'd be very much of the opinion you can enjoy both as what they are. I don't know, I was about to say I prefer the Danzig stuff. I kind of hold both in equal measure. I have more of a nostalgia thing for the Danzig era of the band myself, but there's way more of a metal influence here. I wouldn't call it crossover at all. It's labelled as crossover here for whatever reason, but it is like the perfect middle ground between traditional punk and just clean cut heavy metal. There's little elements from here and there that are like kind of thrasher and stuff like that. But yeah, Jesus, the track listing on this, the final track, Don't Open Till Doomsday, I absolutely love that. The Crimson Ghost, you have Resurrection, Black Light, Dig Up Her Bones, Walk Among Us, Speak of the Devil, the title track American Psycho. Good album. I don't like it as much as the album that was to come up after it, but it's a pretty good album. Very expensive to find that now, which is weird. As well as that, the band would weirdly enough get involved with WCW at this point, World Championship Wrestling, and they kind of had this thing where they, like, Jerry Only and Doyle wrestled in a cage match. The video's online, weird to see. And as well as that, Graves took a hiatus from the band in 1998, during which Mike Itazone of Empire Hideous filled in as singer during the tours of South America and Europe. After he returned to the band they signed to Road Runner Records and would release Famous Monsters in 1999. My favourite Graves era album by the band. Unfortunately, he would only be with them for 2 albums. I love the tracks on this. You got Scream, you got The Forbidden Zone, Lost in Space, Dust to Dust, Fiend Club, Helena, Pumpkinhead, Saturday Night. Great album. Weird one about that album, they had an opportunity to record a video for Scream with Mr. George Romero, which was a huge deal to Jerry only anyway, as Jerry would have grown up a horror fan, and George Romero is of course the legend behind. He is the legend behind Night of the Living Dead and like Land of the Dead and Day of the Dead. He is the innovator when it comes to like zombies and stuff like that. He was the one who spearheaded that whole thing of like zombies and cinema and all that kind of crack. And he just passed away a few years ago now, but very very much an innovator in his field. And he was doing the music video for Scream, and unfortunately, Graves decided not to show up, and this pissed Jerry off to no end. And they actually got a stagehand to dress up as Michael Graves, and yeah, they did him up. He did eventually show up to the shoot. He was very very late though. I don't know if they ever actually had him on the video for that. The person they have playing the role of him actually looks quite a bit like him, so I'll have to double check that at some point. What year are we at now? That's 1999. The band commercially were doing really, really well at this point. They were touring Japan, South America, Europe, stuff like that. I have a bootleg here of a VHS recording of their show at the Euphoria or the Astoria in London. I can't remember what it's called. They were tight as fuck during this time too. The set lists were fucking brilliant. They'd be playing for about 90 minutes. Really, really good mix of like what they were putting out at the time, as well as the Danzig stuff. They covered everything. That was the era in which you wanted to really see the Misfits play alive. It's just a sickener that lineup didn't stay together longer. Graves and Chud quit the band and walked off stage on October 25th, 2000. They were touring constantly, tensions were growing between them and everything like that. And as well as that, Doyle took an indefinite hiatus from the band. He took an indefinite hiatus from performing in general. He had remarried, he divorced, he had another child, and he was dealing with tendonitis in his elbow. So, unfortunately for Jerry, he was the lone wolf left, and would be that way for a good 10 to 15 years. And what we're doing now is we are probably approaching the worst era in my mind creatively for the band, which is I would dub it the only era. The way I would look at the band's output throughout all the decades they've been together is like the original run, that's the Danzig era, obviously, all the 90s stuff, that is the Graves era, and then you have the only era as far as the reunion, which happens around 2016. So they released a Cuts from the Crypt compilation in 2000 or 2001. It's a pretty good release, nothing amazing. With complimented box set, not really worth. Can't really justify putting it out on its own. I'd imagine Roadrunner or whoever put it out to keep the band's name relevant, while Jerry only scrambled to put another lineup together. And in fairness to Jerry, put another lineup together he did. He got Mr. Des Cadena, formerly of Black Flag, at the helm and guitar, and most impressive, he got Mr. Marky Ramone on board as well, out of the freshly broken up Ramones as well. The Ramones broke up in 1996, so Marky was kind of idle for a few years, and he got to join the band in the capacity of their drummer for about 2 to 3 years. So the band would get together, they would play a few shows, and in 2000, I want to double check this, is either 2001 or 2002. When did they release this? Second, where is it? Okay, here we go. 2003, they released Project 1950, which was a covers album in which the Misfits covered kind of old school doo-wop pop singles. I'm hit or miss with it. I'm not particularly a fan of it. The album cover is fucking horrendous. It's like something from an early Saturday morning cartoon. It's like a fucking ghoul in a Misfits hoodie switching on a switch, and it projects Misfits Project 1950 on it. Thankfully, it's only 24 minutes long. Some of the unfortunate thing about this is the songs they cover on this are fantastic, but the covers are shit. Like, the original versions of these songs are great, and this is just absolute shit. Like, I'll read out some. You got Dream Lover, originally recorded by Bobby Darin. Got Diana, originally by Paul Anka. You got Donna by Richie Valens. Great Balls of Fire. Latest Flame, of course. Monster Mash. Only Make Believe, Runaway, and You Belong to Me. And they opened that up with this Magic Moment. It is a grand album. I wouldn't really recommend it if you come away from this podcast and you were mad adamant that you want to check out more Misfits stuff, I would check it out in that regard. You're not going to come away the happiest for it. And from there, the band did fuck all for a very, very long period of time. For 6 years, they would gig consistently, but they would not do anything really recording wise. And Marky would leave the band. Him and Jerry do not have nice words for each other since. Another individual who was Ian Murphy's Law, who I have not taken his name down, joined the band as the drummer as well just after Marky left. And there was a bit of a shit slinging thing going on between Marky and Jerry for a while. Which I'm not surprised by. Marky is a very headstrong and stubborn individual. He claimed at one point to have been in the first heavy metal band, which is absolute shit. The band he was in, can't remember the name of them, remember listening to it one even when it was Scuttered. Great stuff, but way more akin to hard rock than heavy metal. And yeah, so that was pretty much it for the Misfits for a while. And then in 2009 they released the Land of the Dead single, which is pretty solid. But they were consistently gigging around the UK and stuff like that for a very long time. Not my favourite lineup of the band at all. I've seen live footage of the band as well around this time, and it's just it's best reflected on the live album they released in 2013. I think, is it like Live Evil 2? No, they released 3 live albums in their career. I forgot to touch on that one. And they released a live album with Michael Graves called Evil Live 2. That was around 2000 or 2001, and that was actually only available to Fiend Club members. You had to be a member of the Fiend Club to be able to buy that CD. As well as that, then they would release another Dead Alive in 2013. That was the other live album. It is genuinely, Dead Alive is one of the worst live albums I've ever heard in my life. We'll touch on that in a moment. On October 4th, 2011, the Misfits would release The Devil's Reign. Widely regarded by most to be the lowest point in the band's career. I look at this in the same way that I look at Iommi's run with Sabbath when he was like the only original member for about 6 to 7 years between the late 80s and the mid 90s. I think a lot more people would look at this album more fondly if it wasn't a Misfits album. I genuinely think that after that lineup of the Misfits broke up in 2000 or 2001, I think that should have been it for the Misfits. The Project 1950 thing, if that had been the debut album under like Only, it was a Jerry Only solo project or a supergroup, and it was named Only, I think that would have went down way better. I think people would look at those albums way more fondly. I know for me, sorry as well, I keep sniffing, I have a bit of a cold at the moment. But yeah, I think a lot more people would look at it more fondly. In the same way, I think if like Headless Cross wasn't under Black Sabbath, if it was under the Iommi banner, I think a lot more people would look at that album more fondly too. So we'll look at the track list on this one. It opens up with the title track, Devil's Reign. You got Vivid Red, Land of the Dead, which was re-recorded for this one. You got The Black Hole, Twilight of the Dead, Curse of the Mummy's Hand, Cold in Hell, Unexplained, Dark Shadows, Father, Jack the Ripper, Monkey's Paw, Where Do They Go, Sleepwalking, Ghost of Frankenstein, and Death Ray. All of the songs here are written by Jerry only, except for Monkey's Paw, Jack the Ripper, and Death Ray, which all 3 are written by Des Cadena. What do I think of this album? I think it's a grand album. I would not recommend it to Misfits fans. It's not really a Misfits album, despite the moniker at the front. This is very much a Jerry only vanity project. And I don't mean that as a dig. If I was in his position and I had, it's easy for me to say, oh, he should have gone and done this. I did not pay those legal costs to acquire the Misfits name. If I had the Misfits name and I had forked out for that, I would be using the shit out of it too. The merchandise around this time as well is fucking atrocious. But yeah, the merchandise around this time is fucking really, really bad. You have like plush bears with the Misfits logo on it. There's a great video I recommend checking out that really showcases this on YouTube called The Misfits Go Toy Shopping in New York. It's either New York or Japan. And yeah, it's like you can tell the lads in the band at that time, they are genuine horror and sci-fi fans, like, do you know what I mean? And they're having fun doing what they're doing. But there's loads of Misfits merchandise in the shop and stuff like that. And like some of it is like I said, plush bears with like the Misfits logo on it, and like they have like these bats, these plastic toy bats and stuff like that, and it leaves you looking at it and you're kind of like, Jesus, like maybe you should just stop making music for a while and just put out merch, because do you know they make huge money on merch. The Misfits do. They do have endorsement deals and stuff like that with stores like Hot Topic and everything like that. I don't think The Devil's Rain needs to come out. I really don't. I don't like I said though. It's not a bad album. I just don't think it should have been released under the Misfits name. But again, like I said, if I paid to get the name back, I'd be using it too. And that's really it for them, recording wise, up until 2013. Up until 2013's Dead Alive, which is actually to date the final release by the Misfits. It is a live album. Like I said, it's a fucking terrible live album. The majority of the tracks from here are all from The Devil's Rain, except for maybe 2 or 3 songs. No, there's about four or five songs that are from the Graves era of the band. Not a Danzig song to be found. I'd say I only just got sick of having to pay Danzig to play those songs. Yeah, it's fucking awful. I remember being in school when this came out. I remember seeing on Facebook it had dropped. It was on Spotify. I remember listening. I remember just being like, what the fuck is this? And I really wanted to see the Misfits at that stage. Not particularly to see this lineup, but they were my favourite band. I would have loved to have seen them. And that album just totally fucking deflated me. I was like, not happening, not for me, not at all. And I actually started listening to the Misfits for a while. I used to follow their career like mad. I stopped following for a brief period after that, and then 3 years passed. I was living in Limerick. I was sitting down with my roommates. I was having a can. I went on Facebook, and the news dropped that the original lineup of the Misfits were going to be reuniting for a few gigs, Riot Fest and some other things. They played several shows between 2016 and 2019, and they played 2 shows at Madison Square Garden, and that to date is the last performances from the Misfits. There has really been no motion or anything like that from the band since. So people have been saying online that there was rumours that lineup of the band, it is Dave Lombardo from Slayer on drums, with Doyle, Danzig and Jerry Oney at the helm of their respective positions, and there is rumours that an album is on the way. I would not hold my breath for that. I don't think that this lineup is going to put together any recordings, and I think it's nearly better that they don't. I think that Danzig fronted era of the band needs to kind of be left alone. But that being said, if they can get their shit together and they can produce a good album, I'll be all for it too. Like, I'm very hit or miss on the idea of a new Misfits album with that lineup, considering listen to the last Danzig album, listen to the last Misfits album. The only thing that with any promise there would probably be Doyle. Doyle's solo work in the last few years has been fucking great. Was due to be seeing him, or I think he's due to be playing Ireland in June. Won't be happening over the pandemic, unfortunately, and I really hope that gets rescheduled. Doyle's current solo project's fucking class. Might cover him at some point. If I put together a podcast or take a retrospective look at like short-lived solo careers, I'll definitely do that. His solo career is still ongoing and stuff like that, but there's only 2 albums out. Abominator, and I think the second one is called Doyle 2. I genuinely think it's called Doyle 2. I'm not too sure, but yeah, good albums, well worth checking out. And that's pretty much it for the Misfits. That is their career really in a nutshell. There is 101 more detailed documentaries about the band on YouTube. You go on their wiki, it's way more detailed than I went into there. Just a brief overview of the band, a little bit of their little bit of background about the band, my 2 cents on albums and stuff like that. But excuse me. The important questions that we need to ask after this. Right, I want to get out into the Misfits. You're after boring the shit out of me for the last 48 minutes. I want to know what I need to check out. Okay, if you want to get into the Misfits, here is the best way to get into the Misfits that I would recommend. Is you can find 2 compilations online, Collection 1 and Collection 2. And a lot of the recordings from stuff that remained unreleased from the original era of the band found their way into the public domain through these recordings, or through these releases. These are 2 compilation records that were released, I believe, in the middle of the 90s. It was just before the Graves era really kicked off, and it's a great representation of the Danzig era of the band. I think nearly everything they ever recorded during that era is compiled on those 2 recordings. Album wise, like I said, the easiest way to get into the band album wise would probably be 1980. Was it 81 or 82? 1982's Walk Among Us. You got classics on there like Skulls, Vampira, Astro Zombies, that's my favourite Misfits song ever. Violent World, Night of the Living Dead, loads of great tracks in that. For me personally though, if you like your more kind of New York sounding punk, what I mean I was like the Stooges and the Dolls and stuff like that, would recommend checking out Static Age more. That's my favourite Misfits album ever. But yeah, great band. There isn't really any way you can go wrong with the Misfits, bar everything they did after the year 2000, and I'm not really happy to be saying that. I really, really hope that the lads can kind of get together in some form and do something great, but at the same time, I'm like, you probably shouldn't. But anyway, that's the career of the Misfits in a nutshell. I hope I haven't bored you all to death too much this week with that. Those type of retrospective ones, I'm kind of realising this after doing this one, is like, these would be great if I had someone on board with them too. So who knows, there might be another one of these in a few weeks, where I might do one of these with Tubbs actually, when I have a few cans and tell you the history of Deep Purple. But that would very, very quickly turn into a Sasquatch affair, wouldn't it? If you're wondering why I'm even saying that, my outlet is a firm believer in Sasquatch, and any excuse for that to come up, it will come up. So that would very quickly divulge into that. Anyway, so yeah, that's our look at the Misfits, one of my all-time favourite bands. Yeah, love the shit out of them. Can't recommend checking them out enough. If you're more into your metal than you are into your punk, go for the Graves era stuff, Famous Monsters and American Psycho. Particularly Famous Monsters, I think that's a really, really easy album to get into, particularly heavy as well at times. If you are into the likes of Sodom and Creator and you want to dip your toes in the Misfits, Earth AD and Wolf's Blood, that would be my recommendation to you. Killer album as well. So yeah, that is pretty much it when it comes to the Misfits, and that is pretty much it when it comes to this episode of From the Depths for this week. Yeah, had fun researching I didn't really have to do much research for this. I got to know the band's history relatively well. But yeah, if there's any bands you want me to cover, bands I don't listen to, bands I probably do listen to, if you have a particular band that you want me and probably a guest next time to go through in detail, feel free to get in contact via our Instagram page or our email or whatever, and I will consider absolutely everything. On next week's show, I can't remember whether I mentioned this at the start of this episode or not, I will have Mr. Owen Galligan of Limerick band Slung from a Tree, as well as Rhys Slow and Dara Byrne of Limerick band New Age Messiah, and Aaron O'Neill will be from Zephyr will be returning to the show next week. We are going to be doing a panel episode talking about some of our favourite Siege of Limerick memories, as the Siege of Limerick was due to be taking place on April 4th, as it's Easter Sunday, but due to the pandemic it won't be. So what I'm going to do is I'll hopefully have 2 podcasts released that week, but we'll see how things go. As much as everyone is at home and everything like that at the moment, people are still quite busy. I know that one anyway. The panel one is going to be recorded over this weekend, and that'll be out for you next Friday. So I can tell you now, it's going to be a long one. Have a can or two for it. It's basically going to be a cyberpunk affair, and I'm very, very much looking forward to getting that out. So yeah, on a final note, as always, if you want to support the show and all of that crack, you can do so by following us on Instagram at From the Depths Metal and on Facebook at From the Depths Metal Radio. As well as that, like I said at the start, we have the show on Wired FM. As from next week on, it is going to be me live reacting to bands that I randomly find on Metal Archives. I'm going to hit the random band generator and we are going to play whatever comes up, and I'll live react it on the air. So yeah, that is pretty much everything for this week's episode of From the Depths, or that is everything for this week's episode of the From the Depths podcast, lads. As always, my name is Emmett, and thank you very much. I will see you next week. Good night and God bless.